Okay, so as you can see here, I've got the two wing halves of the Pop Wing. So step one, basically what we're going to do is make sure that all of the little grooves line up. Now, there are grooves that are cut, and I know there's no way you're going to be able to see it, but there's grooves cut, actually pre-cut in the foam, and that's where these carbon fiber rods right here, these carbon fiber rods are actually going to go inside of those grooves to kind of support the wing once you glue it together. Alright, let's begin. First, what we're going to do is we're going to take the two wing halves, and you want to do this on a really flat surface. We're going to take the two wing halves, put them together like so, alright, and you can see pretty flat on each side. You want to make sure that the flat side is down, and we're going to put some CA glue on the inside of it, basically on the inside of edges right here, and the inside edge right there, and then we're basically going to put them together. Now the key to this is basically lining it up, getting it on a flat surface, so that when you get done there's no warping or no dihedral on one side or anything like that. You want to make it as even as possible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and glue this together, and once it's glued together we'll see what it looks like. Okay, so as you can see here, I've glued it together. It's all in one piece now. I know it's going to be really hard to see because this thing is actually fairly large, but I've glued it all together. And what I did, I noticed that to make it a little bit easier, is I actually put glue down one side of the wing and I sprayed activator on the other side of the wing. Now that helped it cure a little bit quicker. One of the problems that I did notice though is it cured really quick and didn't give me a lot of time to actually adjust the wing, so you have to make sure you get it perfect. There is a little bit of a lip, but I don't foresee that really being any issues. It's nothing really that's going to affect the airflow. So from here on, what we're going to do is we're actually going to install the carbon fiber rods. Now I'll take the carbon fiber rods, there's 3 of them. Per the directions, there's going to be 2 carbon fiber rods that insert onto the bottom, and you'll have to look really carefully for the grooves. But basically what you want to do is find that groove right there, and you'll basically just sink it in. Okay, and it's rather difficult to sink it in. Then you're going to need a hobby knife, because one of the things that you're going to come across is right in the middle here, you'll actually see that you've CA glued that. So you're going to have to take a hobby knife and kind of cut through that glue to get that rod to sit down in. And you basically run the rod through some CA glue, stick it in, and then cure it. Next, there's going to be a groove that's slightly below the battery compartment. And you're going to have to find it. It's rather difficult to find, these little grooves are. But basically, same thing. Find the groove, lay it down, and push it into the groove. Alright? Now once you lay that groove down, glue it in, and then we'll get to the top part. There's actually another groove right on the top. And that groove, you're going to have to find, it's rather difficult to find. So basically I'm going to go ahead and glue all the carbon fiber rods in. Once it's done, I'll point out all the locations, show you how it looks, and I'll get back to you. Okay, so I've got the control, or disregard, I've got the carbon fiber rods in the actual aircraft. Now you can see right here, these 2 locations. On the bottom is where those 2 carbon fiber rods will go. Basically just coated them in a little bit of CA. And then I place them inside the little groove that's already pre-cut, so you don't have to groove it yourself. Now, place them inside that, make sure it cured, and then you can see on the top right here, right in the Pop Wing logo, there's the 3rd one. Alright, basically put them in there, let it cure for a little bit, and we'll press on. So, the next thing that we're really worried about is going to be the motor mount. The motor mount comes pre-assembled. You can see it right here, pre-assembled motor mount. It's made of balsa, it's glued together rather nice, so if you want, you could throw some glue on it, maybe some CA or maybe some epoxy just to strengthen it up a little bit. But I'd pretty much wait until after I got it in place to make sure it wasn't impinging on any of the areas. So, what we want to do for that, keep this upside down for the most part. And then you're just going to line this up as best as possible. Now, try to figure the best way out to get this thing on here. You want to basically mount it in this kind of a configuration. Alright? So, right here is where we want it. This is where we'd like our motor mount. I'm going to go ahead and mount the motor, and I'll let you know when we're done, and we'll see what it looks like. Alright, as you can see, I've mounted the motor mount on the actual Pop Wing itself. Now keep in mind when you're mounting it, you're going to want this tab right here to be on top. Okay, there's a specific angle that this thing needs to mount at, and you can see right here basically that it mounts, and it lines pretty close up. Some of the tips and tricks that I would recommend with it would be put a lot of glue on that flat tab that's going to go on the top right here. Alright, put a lot of glue there on the bottom, and then it'll actually stick very well. Try to get it as center as possible. If you see, you want that line to go right down the middle. Once it's in place and it's cured and it's actually not going to move, then I just ran a bead of CA around the entire thing, through the insides, and then also on the insides right here. You can actually see that I ran the CA glue down there. And that should hold it on pretty sturdy. I mean, you can see I'm holding the whole Pop Wing up and moving it a little bit, and it's not going anywhere. So that's the motor mount. It's pretty easy, pretty self-explanatory, pretty straightforward. So I guess we'll move on to the next part. Okay, next we're going to work on the battery tie down. Now the battery tie down comes separate. It's a nice piece of just little basic balsa with a simple Velcro strap. Now whenever you glue this down, it's going to be with CA glue. So any CA glue will really work. This is EPP foam, so the entire time you can just use your regular CA glue with an accelerator, and it's actually not going to affect the foam. Alright, so some of the things that I was looking at in the directions. Whenever you mount this in particular, you're going to mount it so that the Velcro strap is on the bottom of the tabs. You basically want to be able to see those two pieces of wood right there. And also you want the buckle piece, or where the strap will actually go through, towards the front. So whenever you mount it, it'll basically look just something like that. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and glue the battery strap down, and I'll let you know how it goes, see if there's any problems during the process. Okay, so now we got the battery mount in, battery tie down. CA glue the piece of wood in there. It's pretty sturdy, it's not coming out. Just make sure that this part is a little bit shorter than the rest of the part, otherwise you won't be able to tighten the battery down all the way, so keep that in mind. Also, next what we're going to do, this compartment here, what we're going to deal with is the actual tie downs for the ESC and the receiver and all the electronics. So we're going to go ahead and work with that. What we have, basically 4 holes. If you look really close, you can see 4 holes. And you're going to use 2 zip ties right here, and you're going to thread them through front to back. They're cut only one way, so you'll see plainly when you're putting this thing together that that's what you want to do. So I'll go ahead and do the zip ties, put them in there. Now keep in mind, you're not going to zip tie them down yet. You're just going to put them through there loosely so they're ready to be zip tied whenever you install your electronics. So I'm going to go ahead and install that, and I'll get back with you when we're done. Alright, so I've installed the zip ties. You can see right here, there's my zip ties sticking straight out. That's the configuration they're going to stay into until a little bit later. Alright, so just leave them be, and we'll move on to the next thing. Basically what we're going to work on next, we're going to install the servos. Alright, before we get started installing the servos, one of the things we need to worry about is actually working on the servos themselves. They don't come put together, so what we're going to work on is actually installing the control horns. First off, you're going to have your typical connector right here. You can see it's got the little nut on top, and on the other side it's got the screw. Alright, the easiest way to go ahead and do this is just to install it onto the control horn before you even attach the control horn to the servo. See it right there. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do both the servos for both sides. I'm going to attach these two together, and then once I attach them together, we'll get back with you and we'll go on to the next step. One note that I wanted to note with the actual servos themselves, none of the control horns actually came fit for these little screw type deals. So if you see these screw type things right here, the holes that are actually in the control horns right where it goes through the control horns aren't big enough to actually accommodate the threading that goes through. So I had to take a hobby knife and kind of just ream it out slowly, because you don't have a lot of room to work with. If you do it too fast or too much or put too much pressure, then what's going to happen is you're actually going to break the servo arm. So I had to ream it out with a hobby knife. I used a hobby knife that's just your typical type of hobby knife. What I did was I actually used this kind of a hobby knife. I stuck it straight in and then just kind of reamed it out really, really slowly until it fit. I almost actually had to screw this in there to get it so it's nice and tight. So I don't really I don't think that these are going to come out anytime soon. So that's what I wanted to tell you as far as watching out for these control horns. They're kind of your typical cheap generic servos and servo horns. They're decent and they'll get the job done. But if you don't want to buy your own and you want to get the stuff that comes with the ARF, this is what you're going to have to deal with. Not too bad. I mean, if you've built planes before, you know it's a pretty simple fix. Okay, so here's what we got. 2 servos. I've installed the control horn clevises on there. They are those screw type. So if you look really, really close, you can see, and maybe you can't see, but basically on those nuts on the bottom, I didn't really have Loctite that worked. For some reason it was all globbed up. So what I did was just drop a dab of CA right on top of that nut just to keep it from backing out. Now notice I've got my servos that are basically reversed from each other. Wires going to the front, everything's even, and I've got the servos in the neutral positions with the arms facing out. One obviously for one side and one obviously for the next side, the other side. So next what we're going to do is we're going to take these servos and then we're actually going to mount them in the wings. You can see right here, let me put these down, you can see right here on the wings, there's actual holes. These holes are where the servos are going to go. Alright, and they've also included these nice little servo mounts. So as soon as we get this wing here, CA the servo mounts down. Basically you'll CA them over the top of that. You can see really closely what it's going to look like. You'll CA those down, CA them down, and then put the servo right into it and screw it right into that balsa, and you should be good to go. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and install both the servos and run the wires along the wing, and I'll get back with you and let you know if I had any problems with installing the servos. Okay, so here's what we got. Basically what I said, I read the directions a little bit wrong. Normal for how we install the servos, but I was kind of backwards. So as you can see right here on the servos, we've got the servo arm in the neutral position, or as neutral as you can find it. The balsa piece that's going to be underneath of the actual servo, and then the servo will be screwed right into the balsa. The balsa is CA'd down, so everything's nice and sturdy in there. Alright, now let's take a look on the underside just to see how it looks. You can see right here, got your servo wire hanging out, and that's going to run straight over, all the way over to where your receiver and all the good business is going to be at. So I did that for both sides, that side and that side. No real issues, just make sure that you're installing it, you know, basically on the top of the wings, because that's where it wants you to install the control horns and stuff. So one thing you might want to add is, if you look, aerodynamically speaking, it's not really the best. You could probably take this piece right here and maybe turn it upside down. I don't know. Kind of experiment with it and see which works the best. I've already CA'd mine together, so I really don't want to redo it. If I do have any issues or whatever, I'll let you know and basically tell you how I got around it, made it work for me. So what's next? Basically we're going to be able to install from here all the way up to here. We're going to cut and measure some control horns. The control horns are actually included in the package. So I will go ahead and figure out how to install the control horns via the directions. I'll let you know any problems that I had and any pluses and negatives with the process of installing the control horns. So as soon as I'm done with that, I'll let you know what I did, the directions as far as measuring, and the easiest way to install it, and I'll get back with you. Alright, welcome back. So I've got the servo installed, and what I did is I went ahead and I installed the actual control horn too. Slip it around so you can get a good view on what it's supposed to look like from the side. Alright, as you can see right here, I've got my control horn, which is going to be right there. Alright, I've got my servo over here. I went ahead and put the control arm through the little clevis to just get it nice and adjusted. And then what you're going to do is from this point right here down, you're going to measure 110 millimeters, basically 11 centimeters. You're going to measure down and then basically just center your control horn on the actual aileron. Cut a nice little slit, and you'll see how big the slot needs to be because it's just a little tab on the bottom of that. CA glue it in nice and straight. Alright, I put a bead of CA on the outside just to make sure it's held in nice and good. I mean, you can see this thing isn't going anywhere. I would leave this right here loose so that you can adjust it later on whenever you decide to go ahead and bind. Sometimes your servos will actually move, And so when they move, you basically just want to make sure that this goes to its neutral position. As soon as it gets to its neutral position, make sure the aileron or the elevon is actually even, and then go ahead and tighten down this screw. That way everything's nice and centered. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for the next wing, and once I get it done, we'll move on to the next part. Alright, welcome back. So here's what we've got going. I've got both wings completed, control horns installed. I've also got the control rods in. Now the directions say, if you look over here, the directions say to cut off that excess control horn or disregard control rod. I'm going to go ahead and leave it on there so that when I turn on the actual airplane itself, I'm going to let the servos center themselves, make sure everything's nice and lined up, and then I'll tighten everything down and cut off the excess. So what we're going to work on next is actually mounting the motor to the motor mount. So we've got a couple parts that came in the same bag. If you look here to the right, and I'll zoom in for you. If you look here to the right, there's your adapter for your prop saver. Now we're going to use the prop saver just because that's what came with it. We're going to stick true to the build. Alright, so that's pretty much going to go on last. First things first, we're going to mount the motor, which is right over here. We'll mount that motor using the 4 screws onto that motor mount. Okay, now we're going to mount those together. Once we mount those together, then we're actually just going to place them right on the motor mount. Okay, and they should screw in. You screw them into the wood portion using those little screws right there. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and once it's done, I'll get back with you and we'll see how it looks. Okay, so as you can see, basically we got the motor mounted on the motor mount. Alright, we got that one mounted nice and neat. Let me zoom in on here so you can see. Alright, everything's nice and clean. It is thin wood, so be careful, don't screw too hard, otherwise you'll crack the wood. There's the prop saver, like I said, right here. Sorry for the shakiness. Well, hopefully we got that prop on there right. We got the ESC wires that are going to go to the ESC, and next we're actually going to mount the ESC in here. So I've got the ESC out of the package, as you can see right here. Let me go ahead and fix this for you. ESC is going to go right here on the right side. Alright, so keep in mind you're going to want these wires right here to go in that little moon-shaped, half moon or half circle shaped groove, so that you can run your ESC wires that way. So whenever you position your ESC, it should be on the right side right there. Alright, so as soon as we get done installing that, I'll come back and show you exactly what it looks like. Alright, welcome back. So it went a little farther than I anticipated. Alright, so basically what we've done is, if you look here, we mounted the ESC off to the right. You can see that we've mounted our orange receiver. We just decided to go with like a hard case because it looks like it mounts a little bit easier. We tucked in some of the excess wires under the receiver. The receiver's just Velcroed in. We decided to go ahead with the Velcro instead of the zip tie. Alright, the battery in, it's a Sky LiPo 1300 milliamp 25C. Obviously 11.1 3S. Now that plastic clip that's in the back, we actually had to pull up to allow that battery to sit all the way down in there. Okay, you can see the receiver down here, the wires are all plugged in, and the motor and the prop is attached. So basically what we're going to do from here on out is we're going to go ahead and function check everything. I've got all the servos plugged in, everything's good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and function check. We're going to mix the elevons, we're going to function check the receiver, we're going to function check the motor, make sure it's spinning the right way, and we're going to make sure our battery's charged, and we'll be complete. Also, we're going to flip it over, make sure the servos are centered, and then we'll tighten down the control horns, or the control rods. And then once we can tighten down the control rods, we'll cut off the excess with some wire cutters, and we'll be done. Okay, welcome back. Basically what we've got here is we went ahead and we've glued on the side winglets. Okay, they required quite a bit of CA glue. I even used an activator, an accelerator, but it still kind of took a little while to hold on. I mean, it's not really that big of a deal. Okay, we went ahead and set up using a DX8. You can see right here. We set up with the DX8. It took a while to figure out how to mix the elevons to get it right, but basically with the DX8 that we noticed is once you set it for V-tail or elevon mixing, it's kind of stuck that way. So no matter how you reverse the servos, as far as using the controller to reverse the aileron servos, you always end up with something not right. So what we had to end up doing was actually taking the wires out of the receiver and reversing the aileron and the elevator wires that go into the receiver. We tried balancing CG. CG was at about 210 to 212 from the leading edge of the wing. All right, and we used the nose of the wing. I don't know if you can see it right there, but our CG machine wasn't long enough, so those 3 dots that are on there represent the difference between the front and the back. The CG set pretty much right at 210 millimeters from the leading edge. We balanced it with 1,000 milliamp at first, and it seemed way too tail heavy. So we threw in the 1300 like was recommended, and it balanced out perfect. As you can see, it's sitting on the CG machine with no problem. So basically, we are done with the Pop Wing, the 900 millimeter. There's some extra tape right there just in case you decide to crash it or need to reinforce it that they gave to us. And I don't know if you can read it or not, but they've got some pretty good English right there. Give you a second to read that. Pretty funny. So make sure you use that tape, just like they say to in the instruction manual. So that pretty much concludes the build of the 900 millimeter Pop Wing. What we're going to do is we're going to take it out, make sure everything is worked and trimmed out, and we're going to test fly it. So we'll be back soon with the maiden flight of the 900 millimeter Pop Wing from Tech 1.